It was in the quiet town of Aburi, nestled among the green hills of Ghana's eastern region, that the story of Kofi Mensah and his dream encounter with his grandfather took place. Kofi was 35 years old at the time, a schoolteacher by profession, and by all accounts, a man of reason. He lived a modest life, taught mathematics at the local secondary school, and rarely involved himself in the spiritual rituals that his elders so fiercely preserved. Despite growing up in a home where ancestral veneration was part of daily life, Kofi had grown distant from those traditions. His parents had passed on when he was a teenager, and he was raised by his grandmother, Nanaya, a devout follower of the Akan traditional religion. She believed deeply in the power of dreams, especially those involving ancestors. When an elder comes to you in a dream, she used to say, you must listen carefully, they do not come without reason. Kofi, however, had become more secular over the years. Though he still attended traditional festivals and poured libation during major family events, he had long dismissed the idea that dreams were anything more than the mind's subconscious wanderings. That changed in the rainy season of 2021. One evening, as heavy clouds rolled across the mountains and rain pattered gently on the tin roofs, Kofi returned from a long day of teaching and grading. Exhausted, he collapsed onto his bed and fell into a deep sleep. It was during this sleep that he saw the man. The dream began in his childhood home, the small compound where he had lived with his grandmother. Everything in the dream was as it once had been, the scent of wood smoke, the faint echo of drums in the distance, and the flickering light of oil lamps. But one thing was different. Sitting under the mango tree in the courtyard was a man Kofi hadn't seen in years, his grandfather, Kwabena Mensah. Kofi's grandfather had died when he was barely 5. And he had only faint memories of the man, his booming laugh, his cane, and the way he always wore a white cloth around his waist during rituals. Yet here he was, alive and well in the dream, staring directly at Kofi. Bra Kofi, the old man said in Twi, his voice slow and heavy. Why have you forgotten your blood? The word sent a chill through Kofi's dream self. He opened his mouth to speak, but no sound came. His grandfather stood up, his face solemn. Your line is in danger. The land is angry. Go to the shrine. Ask the old one. And just like that, the dream ended. Kofi awoke with a start, his body covered in sweat despite the cold rain outside. He sat in silence for a long time, shaken. It wasn't just the vividness of the dream, it was the clarity. The sense of presence. He felt as if he had truly been there, standing in front of his long-dead grandfather. He tried to brush it off. Maybe it was stress. Maybe it was the sound of the rain influencing his sleep. But that same night, the dream returned. This time, his grandfather said only one sentence, go before it is too late. The morning after the second dream, Kofi sat on the edge of his bed for nearly an hour. He stared at the tiled floor, replaying every word his grandfather had said in the dream. The repetition was disturbing. Why would a dead man appear twice, warning of some vague danger? At school that day, Kofi was distracted. He forgot to collect homework from one class and miscalculated an answer while teaching algebra. His students noticed, whispering among themselves that Mr. Mensah is not himself today. It wasn't like Kofi to give in to superstition. But this felt different. He hadn't thought of his grandfather in years, yet now he had not one, but two vivid dreams of the man, dreams so real they left a lingering feeling in his chest, like the echo of a drumbeat long after the drum is gone. After work, he made his way to visit Auntie Amma, his mother's older sister and one of the few remaining elders in their extended family who still actively practiced the old ways. Her compound was a short walk from his own, shaded by giant silk cotton trees and filled with the scent of herbs, ash, and incense. She greeted him warmly, as always. "Ei, Kofi. The wind must be whispering to bring you here at this hour," she said with a chuckle. He didn't smile. "Auntie. I need to talk." Something strange has happened. They sat under her veranda, sipping palm wine while he told her everything, the dream, the warning, the repetition. Her face grew more serious with each word. When he finished, she leaned back and stared at the sky. So, the grandfather comes now. After all this time. What does it mean? Kofi asked. Alma turned to him, her eyes sharp. In our ways, the ancestors do not visit the living without cause. When they speak in dreams, they come with messages, warnings, blessings, sometimes rebuke. But they do not speak without purpose. But why me? I've never done anything. I haven't even been to the family shrine since I was a boy. That may be why, Alma replied. Your neglect may have opened a path to misfortune. Or perhaps you are the only one left who can hear. The words hit Kofi hard. What do I do? You go, she said firmly. Go and see the old diviner at Barakuso. Nana Kwaku is still there. Though he's nearly blind. He speaks with the spirits. He may know why your grandfather comes. Kofi hesitated. Barakuso was a hill village about an hour away. He had heard of Nana Kwaku. The Akamfo, diviner, known for falling into trance and speaking in voices not his own. Kofi had dismissed such tales as rural fantasy. But now, they seemed all too real. That night, Kofi had the dream again. This time, his grandfather was not sitting. He was standing at the edge of a field. The land behind him was scorched. Blackened trees. Cracked soil. You are the son of a line that once knew balance, the old man said. But now, the balance is breaking. Go to the shrine. Go to the elder. Kofi jolted awake again, this time, with no doubt left. By dawn the next day, Kofi had made up his mind. He called in sick to school, packed a small bag with water, fruit, and a notebook, and set out for Barakuso. The air was crisp as he walked to the Tiaro station, and for once, the usual noise of hawkers and car horns felt distant, like they belonged to another world entirely. The journey took over an hour. The Tiaro climbed steep roads, snaking through forests and mist-covered hills. Villages blinked by, wooden huts, red earth paths, children playing barefoot. Kofi looked out the window the entire time, half expecting to see his grandfather standing by the road. Barakuso was quiet and green. The scent of firewood and herbs filled the air. After asking for directions at the village center, Kofi walked to the edge of the settlement, where a small clay compound stood among thick baobab trees. That was the home of Nana Kwaku, the diviner. He was greeted by a woman in her 60s, Nana Kwaku's niece, who cared for him now that he was mostly blind and too old to walk far. He has been expecting you, she said. Before Kofi had even introduced himself. Kofi froze. Expecting me? She nodded, then led him into the inner room of the house. It was cool and dim, lit only by a shaft of light through the roof. The air smelled of ash, palm oil, and something herbal. At the center sat Nana Kwaku, an old man with white hair in tight curls, skin the color of old bark. And milky eyes that seemed to see nothing, and everything. He sat cross-legged, his chest bare, beads around his neck, and a piece of white cloth tied around his waist. You are the grandson of Kwabena Mensa, the old man said before Kofi could speak. Yes, Kofi replied slowly. The one who stands in your dream, he is not simply visiting. He is warning. Your bloodline has been interrupted. There is a wrong that was never righted. Kofi's heart pounded. What wrong? Nana Kwaku picked up a calabash bowl filled with cowrie shells and herbs. He shook them slowly, humming under his breath. Then he dropped the contents onto a woven mat and studied the pattern. His voice deepened, almost changing. There was a promise made by your grandfather, to the land, to the ancestors. A sacred tree was cut, a shrine was moved without ritual. The spirit of the land was angered. But your grandfather made a vow, that the family would make annual offerings to restore balance. That promise has been broken. Kofi blinked. He had never heard this story before. Your father forgot, the old man continued. And now the land beneath your family's house is restless. Your dreams are not just dreams, they are echoes of that imbalance. What must I do? Kofi asked, almost whispering. You must go to the old family land. There is a tree stump, half dead, half living. There, you must pour libation. You must speak your grandfather's name. And you must call for balance. Kofi nodded, though his mind swirled with questions. Was this real? Could one broken promise ripple across generations? The old man's voice grew softer. The ancestors are not far. They only wait to be remembered. Kofi left Barakuso late that afternoon. Carrying with him more than just the words of Nana Kwaku, he carried the weight of a forgotten promise. The return trip to Aburi was quiet, the hills now seeming older, wiser. And far more mysterious than before. That night, sleep did not come easily. When it did, there were no dreams. Only silence. The next morning, Kofi walked to Auntie Alma's house. He told her everything, Nana Kwaku's vision, the broken promise, the need to visit the old family land. Alma listened intently, nodding slowly. Yes, she said. As if confirming something she had long suspected. I remember the story. You do. She stood and disappeared into another room. Returning with an old photo, faded and yellowed, with 4 men standing around a tall tree. One of them was Kofi's grandfather. This was taken before the tree was cut. It stood on the edge of our family's farmland, near the riverbank. Your grandfather and his brothers cut it down for expansion, but the elders warned them, it was a sacred tree, a dua kronkron. They were told to perform the appeasement rituals. Your grandfather promised he would. She paused, then looked down. But the land changed after that. Crops failed. Strange illnesses came. Then your grandfather died suddenly. Kofi's mouth was dry. So the vow was never fulfilled. Alma shook her head. Not to my knowledge. After your father moved to Accra, no one kept the rituals. We forgot. A decision was made that same day. They would return to the land, Kofi, Alma, and 2 other elders who still remembered the old ways. They gathered ritual items, a bottle of palm wine, white cloth, an egg, kola nuts, and a small wooden stool that had belonged to Kofi's grandfather. The next morning, they set out at sunrise. The path to the land was overgrown. The earth soft from recent rains. Birds called overhead, and insects buzzed in the grass. After an hour's walk, they arrived. The land was wild now, unused and overrun with weeds. But in the middle stood a strange sight, a tree stump, cracked down the center, yet sprouting green shoots on one side. Half dead. Half alive. Kofi felt his skin prickle. This is the place. Alma said quietly. Pour the libation. Speak from your blood. Kofi knelt before the stump, uncorked the palm wine, and began to pour it slowly onto the earth. In the name of Kwabena Mensa. Son of this land, he said. In the name of our family. I come to remember the promise. I come to restore what was broken. He placed the egg beside the roots, scattered the kola nuts, and tied a strip of white cloth around the stump. His voice shook, but he continued. To the spirit of this land. To the ancestors who watch and wait. Accept this offering. Forgive our forgetting. Show us mercy. There was a stillness afterward. Even the birds had gone quiet. Then, slowly, the wind picked up, first a whisper, then a rustle through the grass. The young shoots on the stump seemed to sway gently, as if acknowledging his words. Alma placed her hand on Kofi's shoulder. It is done. That evening, after returning from the old land, Kofi felt a strange calm. The exhaustion in his body was deep, but it came with a sense of relief, like something heavy had been lifted from his chest. For the first time in days, he slept without fear. And that night, the dream returned, but it was no longer a warning. He stood in the same compound as before, under the same mango tree. But this time the surroundings were different. The air was warm, and golden light bathed the ground. Birds chirped in the background, and somewhere in the distance, a drumbeat pulsed slowly. Like a heartbeat. His grandfather appeared once more, but his posture had changed. He stood tall, his face calm, and his voice no longer held urgency, only quiet approval. You have remembered, he said. Kofi bowed his head. I did not know. I forgot. All forget, the old man replied. But not all choose to remember. A silence passed between them. You have reopened the way. The land will breathe again. But the work is not finished. What more must I do? Kofi asked. Honor, the ancestor said. Not with words, but with living. Keep the path open. Teach others to remember. And then he was gone. Kofi woke at dawn, not startled, not drenched in sweat, but at peace. The morning light filtered gently through the window. And for the first time in weeks, he felt connected, to something larger, something older. Later that week, Kofi returned to school. His colleagues noticed the change. He was lighter, more grounded. Students said he smiled more. Some asked if he had taken a vacation. But something had indeed shifted inside him. He began speaking more with the elders in the community, listening to their stories. He spent weekends at Auntie Alma's compound, learning the rituals she had always practiced. He even began documenting oral histories from his village, stories of dreams, of ancestors, of sacred places and forgotten promises. In time, Kofi helped organize a small festival to honor the ancestors, a return to the customs that had long been neglected. At first, only a few families joined. But each year, more came. Children learned the drum rhythms. Young men and women learned the old prayers. The elders' stools were dusted off and placed at the center once more. And each year, before the festival, Kofi would return to the tree stump, now green with fresh branches, and pour libation. Word of Kofi's festival and his ancestral dreams spread beyond Aburi. In nearby villages, elders began whispering about the young man who had reawakened the land with a libation and a vow. Some were skeptical, believing his dreams were coincidence, or perhaps the emotional result of grief, but others, especially the older generation, nodded with quiet understanding. One afternoon, a man named Yaadu, in his 70s and originally from the same family line, arrived unannounced at Kofi's school. I was told you are the grandson of Kwabena Mensah, the man said. Kofi nodded. Yes. I am. Yaadu smiled. Then we share the same roots. I knew your grandfather. I was there when he made the vow. Kofi's breath caught. He said the land had spoken in signs. Water from the river turned black one morning. A goat collapsed without cause. And the harvest failed. That was when the elders gathered and warned him about cutting the sacred tree. He said he would make offerings every year. The old man shook his head. But times changed. Men grew busy. Promises faded. But why come now? Kofi asked. Because you remembered. The old man said simply. And when one remembers, the others begin to stir. They spoke for hours, about the land, the river, the family stories that had nearly vanished with time. Kofi recorded it all in a small notebook, his fingers aching as he wrote. That evening, he thought of something Nana Kwaku had said, the ancestors are not far. They only wait to be remembered. He understood it more deeply now. The dreams weren't just personal, they were echoes sent down through the lineage, sounding the alarm so that someone, anyone, might finally hear. In the months that followed, subtle but meaningful changes occurred in Kofi's family. His cousin, who had been bedridden with a mysterious illness, began to recover slowly. No medical explanation could account for the change. An uncle who had struggled with failing crops suddenly saw a good harvest. Kofi didn't rush to claim it was because of the ritual, but others weren't so cautious. The ancestors are no longer angry, Auntie Amma said during one of their evening chats. The land speaks gently again. Kofi also noticed something else. The dreams became less frequent, but more serene. Sometimes he would see a quiet river, or a tree with deep roots. Or hear a drumbeat that woke him up with tears in his eyes. These weren't warnings anymore. They were blessings. One night, he dreamed of a wide field. And his grandfather was sitting with other elders beneath a great baobab tree. They were laughing softly, sharing food. His grandfather turned to him, held up a calabash, and said, "Drink. You are now the voice." When Kofi awoke, he knew it was time to go further. Kofi's transformation was no longer a private journey, it had become a calling. Within a year of his first dream, he founded a small initiative in Aburi called Nsemfai, the House of Stories. It was not a shrine or a religious center, but a space where elders could gather to share oral histories, rituals, and ancestral knowledge with the youth. Storytelling circles formed, and monthly dream-sharing meetings became a cherished tradition. Kofi invited not only traditionalists, but also Christians and Muslims from the community. To remember, he would say, is not about abandoning faith. It's about honoring the roots that feed it. People began to open up. An old woman shared a recurring dream of her father standing by a river and weeping. A teenage boy spoke of a voice calling his name in you, a language he never learned. Another teacher admitted he'd been having strange dreams of a forest path he didn't recognize, but his grandmother confirmed it led to their ancestral home in the Volta region. One of the most powerful moments came during a gathering when a young woman named Esi, a nurse, stood up and said, "Last month, my mother appeared to me in a dream. She told me to forgive my father. The next morning, I traveled to see him after 10 years of silence. We made peace. That dream saved my family." Kofi began to see that ancestral communication through dreams wasn't rare, what was rare was the space to speak of it. For too long, modernity had cast dreams aside as unimportant. But here, under the wide Ghanaian sky, people were reclaiming that lost language. Almost 2 years after his first dream, Kofi returned to Barakuso to visit Nana Kwaku. The old man was now frail, nearly immobile, but his spirit remained sharp. "You have done well," the diviner said, his voice low. "The tree lives. The line breathes." Kofi sat beside him on the earth floor. "I still have many questions." "You always will," the elder said. "But now you are a custodian. You carry memory. That is more powerful than any answer." He paused. "One day, you too will appear in someone's dream." Kofi felt those words settle deep within him. As he stood to leave, Nana Kwaku reached into a pouch beside him and pulled out a small carved amulet, a symbol of Nyam Nu Namawu, God never dies, therefore I cannot die. He pressed it into Kofi's palm. "Keep this. For when you forget again. Because even the keepers sometimes forget." 3 years after that first dream, Kofi stood once more before the sacred tree stump, now a small flourishing tree. Its green leaves rustling in the breeze like whispers from beyond. The soil around it was clear and tended. Offerings, small bowls of water, a calabash of palm wine, and folded white cloth, lay at the base. This time, he wasn't alone. Dozens of people gathered behind him, elders with walking sticks, children in white clothes. Drummers seated with stretched goatskin drums, and women carrying baskets of fruit and herbs. It was the annual festival of memory. Now a community tradition, marking the time when the ancestors first returned through Kofi's dream. As the libation ritual began, Kofi stepped forward to speak. In the days of forgetting, the land grew quiet. But in remembering, the land sang again, he said. The ancestors are not behind us, they are among us. They speak in dreams, in trees, in sudden winds. In the silence we feel but cannot name. He poured the libation with steady hands, calling not only the name of his grandfather, Kwabena Mensah, but also those of forgotten aunties, uncles, and neighbors whose graves were now covered with moss and thyme. After the prayers, the drumming began, slow at first, then faster. Some elders began to chant. A young boy, barely 9, suddenly stepped forward, entered the circle, and began dancing with the rhythm of someone far older. His grandmother gasped. "That's his great-grandfather's step," she whispered. The moment rippled through the gathering like electricity. Kofi returned home late that night and sat outside beneath the stars. The amulet from Nana Kwaku still hung around his neck, now darkened with time and sweat. He looked up at the sky, clear, endless, ancient. He thought of all the ways his life had changed since the dreams began. Not in riches or fame, but in something deeper, a sense of rootedness. The knowledge that he was part of a long story, one whose voices didn't end in silence. That the dead weren't truly gone. They were just waiting to be heard. He picked up his journal and wrote. "I have learned that remembering is not just an act of the mind, it is a ritual of the soul. The ancestors do not want worship. They want connection. To be spoken to. To be honored in how we live. I once thought dreams were stories made by the brain. Now I know they are letters written by the soul, sometimes by our own. And sometimes by those who walked before us." Weeks later, a student of his, quiet, serious, 15 years old, asked to stay behind after class. "Sir," the boy said nervously, I've had a dream. The same one 3 times now." Kofi leaned in gently. "What do you see in it?" "There's an old man. He's standing near a river. He keeps pointing at the water, saying, 'Speak to the root.' I don't understand it." Kofi smiled. "Maybe you don't need to understand it fully. Maybe you just need to remember it, and begin." He reached into his desk drawer and handed the boy a fresh notebook. "Here," he said. "Every time you dream, write it down. Don't let it slip away. You never know who might be speaking." The boy nodded slowly, holding the notebook like something sacred. As he walked out, Kofi looked up to the classroom window. The sun was setting, casting long golden rays across the desk. And he knew. The story had begun again.